Hello and welcome. I'm Christy Rose Muir, and today I'm going to be sharing with you an introduction to the human design system. So, I have been uh, learning and studying and experimenting, which we'll talk about later, with this system for about 7 years. And it's a massive system. There's so much to know. And there's more to know than what I actually know currently at this point in time. But I have spent a good deal of time with the system, including living my own design to the best of my ability, as well as I have a library that is filled with people's charts. And I've done several readings, handfuls of readings, maybe a few dozen. And I've really gotten to live with the system in real life with people that I actually know and get feedback from them about their human design and how the system gives them insight into who they are. So that's just a brief introduction to me and my experience with this very vast, prolific system. And for the rest of the time together, we're going to just go over some of the basics of what it is that you would need to know uh, before or as you are starting to look into the system and learn about your unique body graph, so that you can understand what the information, where it comes from, what it's all about in the big picture as you start to zoom into the details of what it's telling you about yourself as a human being. So I wanted to start by just taking you to my homepage. This is my website, Benevolent Concepts. If I can close this here. And I just wanted to start out by introducing myself and my work a little bit. As I said, my name is Christy Rose, and Benevolent Concepts is a place, as I say here, it's a pocket of the web that is devoted to ideas, systems, practices, services, and experiences that empower you to imagine goodness for yourself, your loved ones, the world, and beyond. So, everything that I share, that I want to share through Benevolent Concepts, is some sort of a framework through which you could say divine order can be perceived. And we can see that there is an order, systems, and structures that support us in our existence. We're not just set adrift in randomness, that there are these really beautiful, cohesive systems of thought that we can utilize to allow ourselves to perceive more goodness or a sense of benevolence that is permeating our human existence and beyond. Because there's more than just humanity in this cosmos, as much as we like to think we're all that there is. So I wanted to show you that if you scroll down here, and if you were to click on human design readings, it will take you to this page where I let you know about some of my offerings with human design. But what I really wanted to show you is that this link is going to take us to a place where I have a little more information about the human design system in case you wanted to read this on your own time. But I'm going to use this as kind of a guide for what I'm going to share with you in this video. So, the human design system is a modern synthesis of ancient esoteric wisdom grounded in scientific principles. Human design synthesizes the wisdom of astrology, the Kabbalah, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, and quantum physics. The origins of the system are where science and mysticism intersect. So things get interesting here because we're going to be hopping back and forth between things that are thought of as esoteric, sort of mystical, maybe even a little woo-woo systems, and some actual grounded science, starting with this supernova 1987A that happened in February of 1987 And so you can see here, this was actually a significant event. It was covered in Time magazine just about a month later after it happened, sometime in February of 1987. And it was significant because this supernova within the Tarantula Nebula of the Large Magellanic Cloud Galaxy was visible from Earth. And as scientists observed it, they saw a release of neutrinos, these very prolific subatomic particles. And the energy of this release of neutrinos was equivalent to all the visible light in the entire known universe. So while studying data from the event, scientists observed tiny oscillations, which suggested that neutrinos indeed had mass. Now, this is significant because scientist Wolfgang Pauli was the first to postulate the theoretical existence of neutrinos in 1931, but they weren't validated to have mass until much later. Scientists actually created this massive superconductor. It's actually called Super Kamiokande superconductor, and it's in Japan. And you can see here that there are these two human beings inside this massive structure. It also contains a tank of water and 50 million gallons of water or tons of water or something like that. It's a massive amount of water. And it was designed to study these tiny, tiny particles that had been thought of as ghost particles for a very long time, in that they move through solid mass with very little to no resistance at the speed of light. And so it was questioned whether they actually had enough mass to interact with matter. Now, I know you must be asking, what does this have to do with this system that's supposed to be based on astrology and kind of tell me about who I am? Well, we're getting to that. Bear with me here. On an average day, 3 trillion neutrinos flow through the Earth every second, traveling at close to the speed of light, passing through solid objects with no resistance, creating a vast field of energy and information. It's a moving field of energy information. In fact, we are right now, as I speak, and whenever you're watching this video, existing within a sea of neutrinos. There are neutrinos flowing through every square inch of space every second. They are so prolific. And because, okay, here we go. Research into these mysterious and prolific particles continued for decades, even after Wolfgang Pauli first postulated their existence. But even after supernova 1987A, during which the reported number of neutrinos passing through the Earth swelled from 3 trillion to 9 trillion per second, this did not offer definitive proof of their mass until June of 1998, when the experiment of this Super Kamiokande superconductor that I just showed you completed an experiment during which neutrinos were observed to change from one type to another, which could only occur if they had mass. Okay, so like I showed you before, there was this massive superconductor that was built to study these tiny little particles. They gathered information from this explosion, the supernova in 1987, but they weren't actually able to validate the mass of the particle until 1998, when all of their data had been combed through. And so they validated that this neutrino has mass. The significance of this confirmation of the neutrino's mass pertains to the ability of distant celestial bodies to impact physical life on Earth. So if neutrinos actually have mass, they can transfer information from one object to another on their journey through the cosmos. So this is where we get into the scientific soundness of the system of human design. Neutrinos are produced mostly in stars. 70% of the neutrinos that are passing through the Earth come from our sun. But neutrinos are coming at us from all directions, from every star in the universe. And now that we know that they have mass, we can understand that these tiny particles travel at cosmic speeds, transferring information from one object to the next and then continuing on their journey. Therefore, it is scientifically sound to suggest that neutrinos passing through, for example, the planet Jupiter, and then moving through the Earth will transfer information from Jupiter into every object on the planet. Isn't that an interesting thing to contemplate? That this explosion of a star so far away in the universe gave scientists information, because that's what happened, is that the neutrinos and the light that was traveling through space from this explosion, it carries information. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And so the information travels these vast distances, or from the objects in our solar system as neutrinos pass through them, and arrive at our planet and our physical bodies, and they're actually able to interact with the matter that makes us. And so around the same time that scientists were conducting this experiment, learning more about neutrinos, a man who came to call himself Ra Uruhu, he was having an experience on the island of Ibiza, which is in the Balearic Islands of Spain. I actually spent a summer on the island of Ibiza, and at the time I knew nothing about human design, but if I had, I could have gone and met this man who died in the year 2011. But Ra was given information. The plot thickens when we explore a mystical revelation received by Alan Robert Krakauer, a Canadian man who had left civilization behind to live in the countryside of Ibiza, one of the Balearic Islands off the coast of Spain. In January of 1987, about 6 weeks prior to that supernova, Krakauer found his small country-style stone shelter, a little casita in the campo, the countryside of the island of Ibiza. It was filled with a light and a commanding presence that he called the voice. For the rest of his life and all throughout his teachings of this system, he simply referred to this light and this presence as the voice. And there's a whole story. He tells the whole story of these 8 days. If you ever wanted to go on YouTube, there's a video of it. He tells the story, and it's quite fascinating. But for the following 8 days, the voice dictated the human design system to Krakauer, including information that neutrinos have mass and are a cosmic programming mechanism, specifically delivering imprinting information to the information structure of the human DNA. Okay, so here is where we get to the intersection of Ra and his experience receiving this mystical download of information, and that supernova that scattered all these neutrinos through the universe, and scientists receiving this information. Now, what's interesting is that Ra, he validated, excuse me, let's close that one up here. Ra received information in January of 1987 that neutrinos have mass. He was given this information by the voice, but science wasn't actually able to validate it through the information they received from the superconductor until June of 1998. The information was actually available to humanity at that time, as if we were able to perceive the light of the supernova, which we were, it was actually visible to the naked eye. The information was also instantly available. And so science went around it its way. It created a superconductor, it conducted experiments with the scientific method, and it combed through the data that it gleaned from those experiments for another several years before it was able to validate what Ra was able to receive directly from this presence called the voice. He received directly the information that neutrinos have mass. So it's very interesting that these different ways of knowing, but they converge in this system. And so what Ra received was a revelation of how various esoteric systems that already existed on the planet could be combined and then looked through as a kind of cipher to decode the information in our human DNA structure. It's basically what we're talking about here. We'll get more into that in a moment. So, human design, the system of human design is a synthesis. And when we look at this infographic, it's a very dense infographic. You'll see there are all kinds of symbols and numbers, and then there are these centers and these lines that go between them. We're going to talk about what those represent and what they're about. But the infographic is a synthesis. The I Ching and the hexagrams of the Chinese I Ching are seen around the outside. We see the numbers that correspond to the hexagram then on the inside of the I Ching. We have the astrological signs of the Western zodiac. Now, they are only used as ways to calculate the positions of the planet in order to determine the gate. But the basic calculations that are used in human design are Western astrological calculations. They're just synthesized with other information. The Sephiro of the Kabbalah, these pathways that go between the different spheres of the Kabbalah. I'm not that familiar with the Kabbalah itself, but I do know that if you look at this body graph and turn it upside down, you not exactly, but you almost get an inverted Kabbalistic tree of life. So that's in there. We talked about the hexagrams of the I Ching. It's represented graphically as a visual here, which we'll look at that a bit later because the structure of the hexagram is significant to human design. And the hexagram has a number as well. There are 64 hexagrams in the Chinese I Ching, and then 64 gates in the human design body graph. And then the spheres, these are centers. The centers represent the the chakra system. They are an advancement of the understanding of the chakra system. So I'll do a little aside here because I don't believe I have a slide that represents this. Maybe I do. Oh, we will get to it. Okay, so here it is. Human design says that in the year 1781, when the planet Uranus was discovered. And again, so we're talking about distant bodies, but once it's perceived visually, the information that's available through that structure, through that object, is actually available to human consciousness. So in the year 1781, corresponding with the discovery of the planet Uranus, there was actually a genetic mutation that happened in our human genome that transformed us from 7-centered beings into 9-centered beings. So it sort of expanded the human story, the archetypes of the human story. Now, as somebody who studied yoga for a long time and has a little bit of an attachment to the elegance and the beauty and the depth of the 7-chakra system, I have asked the question to human design specialists, what happened to the chakras? They have symbols. We know that they have yantras. They have mantras or sounds, sacred sounds that go along with them. Each of them has a lotus flower that has a certain number of petals. And so I wanted to know what happened to these esoteric teachings about the depth of the esoteric wisdom of the chakras. And nobody has a really good answer for me. But I've found that as somebody who practices my awareness in these positions, these areas of the 7 chakras, they're still there. They're still available. And I like to think of these 7 chakras. Actually, we originally, according to this system, started with 5, and then we developed into a 7-centered being. And in 1781, we moved into a 9-centered being. So when we got the 7, the 5 were still there. I believe that now that we have the 9, the 7 are still there, and they're kind of like the energy coming directly in from like the power company into your house. And then you can change the wiring of the house, you can change the appliances, and the things that are plugged into the wiring. And I think that these 9 centers represent sort of an evolution of the appliances or even the wiring of the house, whereas the energy is still coming in to us from the power company, the source, through these 7 centers. So we can still access the wisdom of these basic archetypes of energy through our awareness and through our practices with these 7 centers. But when it comes down to the way that we're expressing the story of what it means to be human, we are now, since 1781, operating in this 9 centered system. That means that the heart chakra, it's split. It's no longer just this heart chakra. It's now has, it's an identity center and a will center. And the solar plexus center, which used to be the third chakra right here, Manipura, it apparently is allegedly split into the spleen and the spleen and the emotional solar plexus over here. So the bottom line is that that is what we're looking at when we look at the synthesis that is represented by this human design body graph. All of the information that is packed into what we're looking at when we see the rave mandala and then the 9 centers with all of the channels and all of the gates of the body graph. Human design calls itself the science of differentiation because, as I'm pointing out to you, the system sees itself as being based on sound scientific principles, including the science of neutrinos. So in each body graph that represents a differentiated human, this is about uniqueness. You are a one-of-a-kind, unique being, and this body graph is meant to be a map of how that got programmed into you by information streaming to us from the cosmos. There are 26 possible activations in each chart. So every person is going to have up to 26 unique activations, but they will have 26 activations. They just might overlap, is what you'll see when you're looking at your design or anyone else's. That includes 13 planetary imprints, 9 centers, 36 channels, 64 gates. So the gates are these little numbers that are on the different centers. When you get 2 gates that are on the end of one of these channels activated, you get a complete channel that represents a quantum of energy potential that is available when it's activated like that to the human being. So the 36 channels can be divided into 64 gates. Each of these gates has the potential of being expressed through 6 lines. That's what these hexagrams are about, and the different structures of these hexagrams represent the way that yin or yang energy is arranged to express the particular energy of that gate. Talk about that a little bit more later. And then covered up right here by this little hover over is that there are levels of substructure that are built into this body graph. So substructure means that we go even deeper than the level of these 26 activations, 13 planetary imprints, 9 centers, 36 channels, 64 gates, 6 lines, which creates a vast array of potential for variation, for variety, meaning uniqueness. But there are also 3 levels of substructure that go deeper. And that means that there's even more potential for variation, variety, AKA uniqueness, meaning your body graph is one of a kind. It will never be repeated because of all of these different these different layers of uniqueness that are represented in this infographic. So the planets we have here, the 13 planets that are used in human design. Some systems of astrology will use other objects, asteroids or Lilith, or they'll include Chiron, or different calculations. Human design uses these 13 planetary activations and their various keynotes. Keynotes is a term that human design uses to speak to the essence of a particular activation or a center or a channel, something that is being shown in the body graph. So the keynote of the sun is that it's your vitality, your power, your will, the ego, and leadership. The earth, where it's active in your design, will show you where you have fertility, evolution. It's about design, it's about the root. Uh, it's also where you find grounding. The moon is feelings, instinct, change, and the body. The north node is your line of geometry, the track of your life in terms of where you're going. The south node is the line of geometry in terms of where you came from. Mercury will tell you about your mind and how your mind will tend to work, and also communication. Venus is art, aesthetics, values, and relationships. So wherever you have Venus activated in your body graph, it will tell you the themes of how you will experience that energy. Mars is about energy, power, desire, assertion, and aggression. Yeah, this is your active energy. Jupiter is where you're going to experience expansion, opportunity, and things that pertain to material matters of your life, abundance, for example. Saturn is about limitation, restraint, discipline, focus, and it's also tends to be where we experience pain in our lives, at least until we learn the lessons of Saturn. Uranus is about transition, revolution, instability, invention. It's also about unusualness. Neptune will show you where imagination, psychic phenomena, confusion, also illusions, drugs, and what's not mentioned here is spirituality, is also indicated by where Neptune is activated in your body graph. And then Pluto is about regeneration, compulsion, renewal, the unconscious. It's also about death and transformation. So the neutrinos are streaming in and they're activating, they're bringing information from the planets and they're activating certain potentials in this body graph for you, the human, to experience. The mechanism of this imprinting, according to the human design system, is that there are three crystals of consciousness that make up your human apparatus. The personality crystal is said to reside up here in the head center, and it is what is known, like it's what's conscious about you. It is who you think you are. It's what you're going to tend to recognize and think you know about yourself first. The design crystal is said to live in this conceptualization center, the Ajna center, and it is all about the body and the unconscious. It is what other people will tend to notice about you first. It's also thought of as the life that you are here to actually live, because this is the physical part of you that is coded into the three-dimensional plane of Earth, of Gaia, where we live with each other. And then the third crystal of consciousness is the magnetic monopole. Now, the magnetic monopole and the design crystal come bundled together. Actually, what happens is that at the moment of conception, the father's sperm calls up from the mantle of the earth, just as it's leaving his body, a bundle of a design crystal and a magnetic monopole that have been living in the mantle of the earth. Gaia creates our bodies. She creates these design crystals that have the potential to be called up by the father's body in the moment of conception. The design crystal and the magnetic monopole are then, they are carried into the egg with the sperm, and the egg then begins to work with the design crystal and the monopole to create your body. This happens for about 6 months of the gestation process until at about the start of the third trimester, which corresponds to the neocortex of the brain actually being ready to receive the consciousness of the personality crystal. At that point, the personality crystal is called into the body that's 6 months mature. The design crystal is then imprinted with the neutrino stream that was streaming through the body at that maturation point of 6 months. So that becomes the imprint of the body vehicle. And the personality crystal comes into the body at 6 months. It stays there for 3 months until the moment of birth, when it is then imprinted with the neutrino stream at the time of birth. Okay, I told you this is a lot of information, but what's happening is beyond what is going into your mind right now. This information is actually speaking to the part of you that knows this, the part of your body, the part of you that has been imprinted with this. And so there's something deeper going on here. So you can let go of grasping with the mind and just allow the information to come to you and speak to you on deeper levels. So what is happening is that these crystals, these esoteric metaphysical crystals, are actually then taking the imprint from the neutrino stream and they're transferring it onto our DNA. Okay, so here we're bringing it together. We had this supernova and these subatomic particles and scientists conducting experiments to validate that there's mass in these tiny particles. Well, why? Why? Because there's something about the mind understanding that there is scientific soundness to this, because our DNA, as we know, it is actually an information structure, information storage in the form of codes to build proteins. That is what our DNA is. We know about the codes, we know about the codons of the proteins for the amino acids, the thymine, adenine, the guanine, and the cytosine. I'm not sure that I'm saying those quite right, but these are the building blocks of our DNA. And we have known for some time, it's been in mass consciousness of humanity, that our DNA that is the code of our uniqueness, that we have unique DNA, right? And that the DNA is built up of these amino acids that are the building blocks. Well, human design has come along to say that the coding of these proteins actually comes from information that has been streamed at us by these neutrinos. It's first come into these crystals of consciousness that capture the information, and then it's coded into the information structure of our DNA. This is what information DNA is for. It is meant to be imprinted with information, and it's coming to us from the cosmos, from the planets, that information from the planets, where they are at that point that was 3 months, about 3 months prior to our birth. And then at our birth, the information of the planets is being programmed into the information structure of our DNA. Okay. And then from there, that information is represented in the body graph. That's that visual graphic that we're seeing. So now you understand that what we're actually looking at when we look at the body graph is we're seeing how the planets have programmed our DNA to create a conscious mind and personality and an unconscious body that are being held together by this magnetic monopole. It's a magnet that only attracts, monopole. It has one pole, it is only an attractive force. The monopole is holding together the personality and the body, the mind and the body, also known as the passenger, the vehicle, and then the driver that is holding the passenger and vehicle together and driving them through the life. That's what we're looking at when we look at the body graph. And it all has to do with our DNA. Now, what's interesting is that separate from human design, there was a mathematician, I don't recall her name right now, it was a woman. I believe it was in the 70s or the 80s. She recognized that there was a very intimate connection between the Chinese I Ching And you'll see around the outside here, there are hexagram numbers, but then there are these amino acid names. She realized that there was a connection between the DNA codon wheel and the Chinese I Ching, namely that there were 64 values in each one. And so we don't actually have to rely only on human design to recognize that there is a connection between this ancient divination system of the Chinese I Ching, also known as the changing lines, that contains 64 archetypes of humanity that can be expressed in 6 different ways according to the changing lines of the I Ching and our human genetic code. So human design has just come and put it all together for us so that we have a map, a schematic of it that we can actually read. And then as we read the information, we recognize ourselves and we see that we actually have a user manual, a very practical user manual to our humanity. It only arrived on the planet in 1987. So many generations of humans have lived without this specific map. But it's really time for us as humans to be able to see our uniqueness and live from it instead of from our conditioning. We're going to talk more about that as we proceed. So here we go. So this is the conscious imprint, the personality crystal that I mentioned before. This is calculated at the moment of your birth. And when you're looking at your body graph, it's always going to be the numbers that are on the right-hand side. And if you're looking at a traditional body graph, traditional is a strong word to use for something that's only been around since 1987, but the standard human design body graph, the numbers are going to be on the right and they're going to be in black. And the black is who you think you are. You have conscious access to this energy. It's always, and the energy that is colored in, whether it's red or black in your body graph, is what you can rely on. This is consistent for you from the moment that it's imprinted, the personality imprinted at your birth, the design imprinted 3 months before your birth. These are consistent for you. They are active your entire life. And so this is what the black is when you're looking at your personality, that the planets were in this position, the neutrino stream came through and imprinted your DNA with these archetypes. The first number here being the one of the 64 archetypes, and the second number here being one of the 6 changing lines of the I Ching. So this is even greater variety, even greater uniqueness. Somebody else might have this hexagram and this hexagram activated, but they might have a completely different line afterwards. And so where there might be similarities, there are also going to be plenty of, there's going to be a lot of difference as well. And so each of us is totally unique. The design is calculated at 88 degrees of the sun, which is either 88 or 89 days, approximately 89 days before the moment of your birth. This is your biogenetic inheritance. So this is actually what you get from your ancestors, from your mom and dad, from your family tree. Your personality is something that comes from more the realm of spirit. Your body is your ancestry. When you look at your body graph, the design is always going to be on the left-hand side of your chart. And again, if you're looking at the traditional keeps coming to my mind, but the normal human design body graph, it's going to be in red. You're going to see all of the gates and channels, or they're going to be represented in the color red. This is your unconscious. Psychotherapy has been trying to, probe the nature of our unconscious and why we tend to do things and seem unaware of it, but the habit persists in our lives. Well, in 1987, we received consciously on this planet a map of it. So we don't have to guess anymore. I believe that the Jungian archetypes and the Reichian archetypes and things like this were all intuitive, trying to glean the way that this information shows up. But now with human design, we actually have a map of it. And just like with our conscious personality, we have the main archetype and then the line value, and those are colored by the planet that was, delivering the information at that particular point in time through that gate. We have a very specific, precise schematic, and we don't actually have to guess at it anymore. So we have the conscious personality, the unconscious design, and these can be thought of, they are thought of in the human design system. The conscious personality is the passenger, not the side seat driver. You're in the back seat of this vehicle that is your body, that is the design that's in red. The magnetic monopole that's holding the two together is the driver. The driver actually knows how to synthesize the information, the chemistry of the two of these together, what is known as your definition, in order to receive a signal that guides passenger and vehicle along the geometry. We saw that word earlier, AKA the trajectory of your life. It's a dynamic trajectory. We live in a moving field of energy, including the other consciousnesses that we live with, the other humans that we live with on the planet, and beyond humans. But for the sake of this system, the matrix that we live within, the 3D Maya, it's moving. So it's as though we are on a track and we have a GPS that's guiding us along. But just like your GPS in your vehicle today can recalculate according to different decisions that you made or the various conditions that are prevailing, your course can also be recalculated. It is being recalculated by you and your choices all the time. But it's this driver that knows how to follow that recalculated route. And ultimately, what human design is here to show us is that along with that change from being 7-centered beings to 9-centered beings that I touched on earlier, we've also gone from being beings who are meant to make decisions based on our mind, our thinking, rational mind, into beings that are meant to receive information from their chemistry and make decisions according to this synthesized chemistry of your body, which is known as strategy and authority in human design. And it's the driver, the magnetic monopole, that knows this signal. It delivers this signal. And if you relax as the passenger into the back seat of the vehicle, this driver will drive you along the course of your life with as little resistance as possible. So the alternative is that we are actually getting out of the back seat, we're trying to get into the front seat, or we're actually trying to get into the driver's seat, and we're trying to drive, but we're only operating on half of the information because we only have the information that comes to us through our conscious personality. That's all we have conscious access to. We don't actually have conscious access to the information of our body, of our design, of our unconscious. It will move us in our lives. And as we live longer in our vehicle, we can look back and have hindsight and go, oh, yeah. And that's how we're going to recognize these unconscious patterns, by the way, is we're going to look back at our lives and go, oh, yeah, I can recognize that pattern. And the longer we've been in our vehicle, the more likely it is that we have enough hindsight to recognize those patterns. But what's actually going on is that we don't have conscious access to the information of our vehicle, of our body, which has a consciousness of its own. It has places to be. It has experiences to have. And as long as we, the passenger, are thinking that we need to try to climb into the driver's seat and drive the life, we're going to try to drive ourselves somewhere that is not factoring in the information of the vehicle. And that will equate to resistance in our experience. We will experience resistance. And we'll talk about how that shows up for us in our experience, how we can recognize, oh, yeah, I have resistance in my life as we move along. So But before we move on from this slide, I want to just reiterate the fact that you are who you think you are, who you know yourself to be and think yourself as. You are actually meant to be the passenger in the back seat with a very capable, knowledgeable driver, a chauffeur that is driving you around in a life that is actually dictated by the biochemistry of your vehicle. The vehicle is the part of us that is designed to move around in the three-dimensional plane of our Earth life. And so that's why when we relax into the back seat, we listen to the driver, we listen to the signal of strategy and authority coming from the driver and allow it to drive us, we reduce resistance in our experience. As we reduce the resistance in our experience, we actually see ourselves, others, and the world a lot more clearly. And we have more compassion, appreciation, awareness, and overall enjoyment of our experience of being human. And so that's why Ra says that human design is about living this knowledge. And in living it, we learn to love ourselves, we love our uniqueness. Okay. So we already spoke about the transition from being seven-centered beings to being nine-centered beings. And that's what we're seeing a map of in our body graph. We're seeing a map of these 9 centers. So now we have a heart and an identity center, also known as the G center. Now we have a solar plexus and a splenic center instead of just what would have been the third chakra in the belly or the solar plexus area that we know from the 9-centered system. But the capabilities of the human are just a little bit more differentiated in these 9 centers. We have 2 pressure centers. You'll notice that the root says pressure, the head says pressure. So what's basically happening is there's a stream of energy coming down from above the head. There's a stream of energy coming up from the earth. So that's Kundalini. Spirit coming down, Kundalini coming up, pressurizing the energy as it moves through all of these different gates and centers in the body. Ultimately, the goal, if there were a goal of the energy in our human design system in our body graph, is to get the energy to the throat. So there's a saying in human design that, as all roads lead to Rome, all of these roads, these gates and channels of energy in the body graph are actually desiring, intending, wanting, needing to get the energy to the throat, because that's where we manifest. That's where we speak, which is where we express, we communicate. And it's also a center of doing. So we want, our energy is compelling us to find ways to get our energy to our throat. Now, if we're listening to our strategy and authority, we're surrendering to the driver and the vehicle, our experience of arriving there and of getting our energy to where it can be expressed so that we can manifest, communicate, and do things, get things done, is going to have less resistance in it. We're going to actually enjoy it more, rather than simply getting to the manifestation, which can be something that we enjoy or not. It can be sustainable or not. We can be guided by our driver, our magnetic monopole in our vehicle, to an experience of manifestation and doing that has less resistance, that is more sustainable in our life, and we can actually enjoy more. So the head center is a pressure center that's all about inspiration. You'll see that there are 3 numbers, there are 3 gates, 3 archetypes of inspiration energy that the human being is operating with at this point in time, at least according to this system. The Ajna center, also known as the conceptualization center, is an awareness center. Head center is a pressure center. Conceptualization center is awareness. And you'll see that there are 6 numbers, 6 gates of conceptualization, 6 main archetypes or themes of conceptualization. Remember, again, each of these can be expressed in 6 different ways. So We're all thinking about things along the same themes, but we can all be thinking about them in very, very unique ways. The throat center, again, is manifestation, speaking, self-expression, communication, and doing. It's where we're trying to get all of our energy to so that we can actually be expressed and fulfilled in our lives. The G center is also known as an identity center. That is the categorization of the center that it is. Instead of awareness or pressure or manifestation, it is an identity center. It is about love of self, universal love, and direction in life. And so the the 8 gates on the G center are all about identity, love, and direction, both for the individual human being, but also we'll see later for humanity as a whole, for what it means to be human, and for the collective of humanity. The heart center is a motor. It is so we have 4 motors in the body graph, and that's the category of center that the heart center falls into. It's actually a motor. Our motors power our activity, our physical actions in our lives. And so they're closer to the physical. And it's actually, this center is correlated to the physical organ of the heart and pumping blood through our system. But it's all about our individual sense of ego and willpower. Now, other keynotes for the center are, a sense of value, and also being able to make and keep promises. So we'll talk about definition and openness in a little bit, but depending on what's going on individually for a person in this center, they're either going to feel that they have consistent access. So for all the centers, this is true. Depending on what's going on for us individually in each of these centers, it's going to determine whether we feel that we have consistent access to the energy of that center, or whether that energy seems to come and go and fluctuate for us. When it comes to the heart center, this is going to be about having a consistent sense of our own self, our own value. This is me and this is not me, and our willpower, our ability to make commitments and promises and keep them, stick to them, follow through with them, or not. The solar plexus is also a motor. This is our emotional center. It's also an awareness center. And a little later, I'll mention that human design sees us as actually in the midst of another mutation, like the one that happened in 1781. It gave us 9 centers. We are mutating into a place where, rather than being a motor center, the solar plexus is going to become an awareness center exclusively. But for now, there is an emotional wave that operates in this center. And again, depending on what's going on for you individually in this center, you may have a consistent emotional wave that you need to be paying attention to in order to make the right decisions for you, to allow that driver, the magnetic monopole, to drive you along in your life. And we'll go into that in a little bit later in terms of inner authority. The sacral center is also a motor. So the sacral center, the sexual center, the second chakra, except that the emotional capacities of that second chakra have been removed. They've been moved to the solar plexus. So this is all about life force. It's all about sexuality. It's a motor that drives our activity, the energy that we feel that we have available for activity in our lives and for sexuality and reproduction in our lives. See if I can reveal, okay, the root center. The root is also a pressure center. It is also a motor center, and it's where adrenaline and stress live. And so all of these gates on the root center are different forms of adrenaline. They're also different forms of stress and pressure. And again, depending on what is going on in your unique body graph, you're going to have a very particular relationship to the energy of this adrenaline and stress, which is a pressure in our lives as human beings. And then the splenic center. The splenic center is an awareness center. It's about our immune system, our actual physical health and well-being, and it's all about intuition. So all of these gates on the splenic center are going to be a different sort of intuitive awareness about self environment that gives us information about our well-being, like our safety, our health, and our well-being right now in the moment. There's a lot more to know about all of these centers, and the information is replete with information that goes into all of the different gates. If you were to get an individualized reading, we would have the ability to look at the specific gates that are active on your specific centers, and you would be able to start to read the map of your unique design. So every single one of us is going to have parts of the body graph that are colored in. And by the way, the colors are always the same. The colors do not change. There's no good color, bad color, or improving your color. If a center is filled in, or colored in, or defined, it's going to always have the same color. And if it's not, if it's open, it'll be white. So whatever is defined in us, whatever is colored in, is fixed and reliable. We can depend on that energy. And as you'll see in a few moments, it is from this definition, what's fixed and reliable in us, that the magnetic monopole is developing this signal that comprises our strategy and authority, our unique decision-making process, your unique decision-making process, for navigating through life. That signal is going to come from whatever is defined, what's fixed and reliable in your design. So it's like, do you want to make decisions in your life that's based on energy that you can depend on, or on energy that is not dependable in your life? I think that the answer is pretty clear. You would want to make decisions that you can consistently trust. That's always going to come from your definition. And this is the life force that you're here to express. Our openness, every single one of us has openness, whether it shows up in a channel, a gate, or in open centers. But this is where we are receptive. And this is also where we've been open to conditioning in our lives. We receive in our openness, and especially when we were young, but even as adults in our lives moving through the world, our openness is where we become conditioned by other and also by the planetary transits and the global consciousness program that is a sea of information that we're all moving around in all the time. So our openness, it can actually shift and fluctuate as we move through different auric fields, as the transits move around, as we interact with different people and different environments. These energies can actually turn on and off for us. But what's happening in our open and receptive centers is that the voice that comes to us from our consciousness in these centers is amplified 200%. And so the voice of our conditioning can come to us through our open centers in an amplified voice that becomes louder than what's fixed and reliable in us. This is another reason that this system is so valuable, is because the conditioning field on the planet is just very, very strong for a number of reasons. The conditioning that we've received from our parents as we're young in our family of origin and our home environment coming at us 200%. And then we go out into the world and we've got these voices that are amplified, that are not who we are. This is not who we are. The defined, the colored in, that's who we are. That's what we can rely on. That's the definition that makes us unique. The openness, we can't rely on that except over time to give us awareness. So openness isn't empty. At first, when we're young, it's full of conditioning. That conditioning can cause us to try to climb into the driver's seat, usurp the magnetic monopole, and make decisions from energy that is totally unreliable and inconsistent for us. Meaning, you make a decision one day, And then maybe a day, or it could be a week or a few months later, you're called on to follow through with that decision, and the energy has moved on. It's totally changed, and you don't feel in alignment with that decision anymore. And so what happens is that our trust in ourselves erodes over time. And then we become just very confused and discombobulated, and we're still trying to operate from these open centers and make decisions from energy that isn't us, but we don't trust ourselves as much. So these voices of the definition of strategy and authority, we're totally wiping them out. We're writing it off, because now we're looking outside of ourselves. Our conditioning is compelling us to look outside of ourselves and look to the people that are conditioning us through these centers, the things that we think we don't have. We haven't developed the awareness about it yet. As long as we don't have the awareness, we're driven by our conditioning, and we are dismissing the voice of our strategy and authority, and we're living a life filled with resistance. It's very uncomfortable. So the other thing that our definition gives us is in addition to recognizing our conditioning and what's fixed and reliable in us, it gives us our type. So definition is going to give us the information of our basic energy type. Human design says that there are 4 basic types of human on the planet right now. Sometimes I like to think of these as, you've got your electric vehicles, you've got your family vehicle, you've got your various types of sedans and things like that, and some pickup trucks, and in the generator, manifesting generator category. And then manifestors, you've got like sports cars, or like just really exotic, unique vehicles that make everybody turn their head. Okay. So on top of that, all of that other customization of the uniqueness, it goes on top of the type, if that makes any sense. It's that there aren't only 4 types of humans on the planet. There are as many billions of humans as there are. Every single one of us is totally unique. But every one of those unique humans is going to be one of these types of energy types. This is how we typically run energy and move through the world, almost like chess pieces, or like, yeah. So you get the basic idea of this. What I was going to say is that, somebody can buy a car, and the make and the model and the color and the year and everything from the outside can look like almost exactly the same, same paint job, everything on the outside. But if you go and you get into the wrong person's car, you know it pretty much immediately, because inside it feels different. It could be that the trim is different, they have a different stereo system, a different steering wheel, leather versus cloth, or they've got tint versus non-tint, whatever. We can go on and on and on. But it's also, how did that person sit in the seat? Where did their weight get distributed? And all of that. All of that are layers of uniqueness that you can metaphorically apply to these different energy types. And I just wanted to say that to show you that we're not carbon copies of one another. Every manifestor is unique, every generator is unique, every projector is unique, every reflector is unique. But these are the basic underlying energy types and frequencies that are operating on the planet right now. And so how do we get there in terms of definition? Well, let's start with the reflector. The reflector is the rarest type of human being on the planet. They're about 1% of the population. And they're thought of to have been like the old saints and sages that would like go off in the mountains, and they rarely interacted with humanity, but then they would come down and they'd have some kind of a message or some kind of a reflection of wisdom to give to humanity. And then they'd go back and do their own thing for a while. The reflectors have no definition. So they will have gates activated. You'll see little lines, but they won't connect any of the 2 centers. So they won't have any definition in their chart. They're completely open. They are the only lunar beings on the planet. And so they really march to the beat of their own drummer. Because they're wide open, they were given this aura that's sort of Teflon. The reflector aura, it resists conditioning. So they don't pick up energy from other people in the same way that some of the other types do, as you'll see when we go along. The reflector samples the environment around them, and they are like the barometers of humanity. Reflectors belong in the heart of communities. They are meant to be really cherished and valued by the communities that they're a part of, because the reflector is going to perfectly reflect what is the health of this community. And they're always going to reflect the energy of the individual that they're interacting with in the moment. They're just very rare and special beings with all this openness and the Teflon aura. Their strategy is to wait for a lunar cycle. And so if a reflector is presented with an opportunity or some sort of decision needs to be made in their lives, the strategy that they are meant to follow is to sit on that decision for a month. And the reason is, in that month's time, all of the planets are going to move, or the moon actually is going to move through all 64 gates of the body graph. And it's going to give the reflector a chance to really feel who they are as they move through this lunar cycle, as the moon lights up all of the different gates in the body graph. And as that energy moves and cycles through them, they gradually arrive at clarity about their decision. Now, when they follow their, when they're not following that inner strategy and the authority that goes along with it, reflectors can live a life that feels full of disappointment. They're disappointed in the people around them. They're disappointed in the communities around them and humanity at large. And this can be a real big problem for reflectors. They don't have a lot of others that are like them on the planet. So they can feel kind of lost and alone. They know that they're very different, and that difference and the current state of humanity on the planet can leave them feeling very, very disappointed. But as the reflector follows their own inner strategy and they really wait out that lunar cycle, they respect their own energy and they don't go out trying to make themselves behave like other humans. When they're in their self, the frequency of their self is to actually be surprised by humanity. So instead of being disappointed, oh, feeling let down by humanity and people, they get to actually feel positively surprised. But this doesn't come from the outside as much as it comes from them honoring their strategy of waiting for the lunar cycle. And again, this isn't easy. There aren't that many reflectors, and the world doesn't usually advise us to wait. We're usually told that we have to go out and make things happen. And so then from there, let's go over to the manifester, because the manifester is not only the next rarest type on the planet. Reflectors are about 1%. Manifestors are about 9 or 10%. With the manifester, the definition that will create a manifester is that they will have one of these 4 motors. We saw that when we looked at the centers. These 4 are motors. One of them or more will be directly connected to the throat. We saw that the throat center is a manifestation center. Hi, babe.
Hey, honey, it's raining and you have a piece of clothing outside.
Oh, thanks for reminding me, honey.
You're welcome.
Where are you at?
I'll be home soon. I can turn on the whole thing.
Okay, I'm in the guest room and I'm just recording something on Zoom, like I'm just doing something for a little while, but I'll be out in a little bit. And my skirt, I'll just throw it in the dryer, so don't worry about it. I'll see you soon. I love you.
All right.
Bye. Okay, I hope that worked out. I paused the recording for a moment, but now we're back. So we were on to the manifester. The manifestor's definition is always going to include at least one motor, could be more, connected directly to the throat, which is the center of manifestation. So that's what makes them a manifester. They will never have a sacral center. You see the generators over here have a red square. Every generator is going to have a red square. None of the other types are going to have a red square. And so the manifester will have an open sacral center, but they will have a direct connection between one of these motors, one of these four motors, and the throat. They are here with a closed and repelling aura that pushes obstacles out of their way. And the manifester is here to do exactly that. They are here to manifest. They are the only type that doesn't have to wait. The generator should have a weight, as you see weight here before the reflector and the projector. Generators should have a weight here. I'll talk about that in a second. But the manifester doesn't have to wait for anyone or anything except internal clarity. They have an internal creative flow that lets them know what it is that they want to manifest. Their aura will push obstacles out of the way, and they are designed to move kind of like the queen on the chessboard, any direction that they want to at any point in time. And that's what they're here to do. And the rest of the types, they actually look at the manifester, and most of us are wanting to be like a manifester. The world is conditioned to think that we're supposed to just go out and make things happen with our motors connected to our throat, just speak things into being, go out and do, make it happen and go. But that's not what the rest of us are here to do. Only the manifester is really here to do that. And even so, they're not here to do it sustainably. They don't have that sacral center that's about sustainable life force energy. So the manifester, if they are not following their strategy and their inner authority, they are likely to experience a lot of anger in the world. Why? Because as they're pushing obstacles out of the way, they actually encounter resistance in the other types who are just like, what the heck? Like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you bulldozing my life and the world and changing everything right now? So the manifester will experience resistance from the other types when they don't do what's called informing, when they don't go to the people around them and say, you know what, I'm starting a new business and it's going to be awesome. And what I would really like would be for you to play this role for me. And I'm going to ask this person to do that. And I'm going to ask this new person to do that. And then we're going to come together and we're going to make this happen. So, because that's the kind of thing that a manifester is here to do. They will have a vision of something and they will need other people to enlist in their vision. But if a manifester doesn't inform the people, it can make the generator a little bit uneasy when the manifester comes along and just says, hey, we're doing this now. And the generator's like, well, I thought we were doing this before. And the results, the response of the manifester to that resistance in the others will also sometimes try to control the manifester that they don't understand. Again, manifestors only being 9 or 10% of the population, the manifester will feel anger. They'll feel anger because they'll feel resistance from the other and they'll feel others trying to control them. And interestingly, the manifester they can operate as lone wolves. They will go out and they can still do a certain measure of creating on their own, but they'll likely still be operating from anger. Now, when the manifester follows their strategy and they inform the people around them, all of that resistance gets reduced and minimized. And the manifester then gets to experience peace. And so the goal of all of the types, if there were to be a goal, would be to recognize if we're operating out of our not self theme, recognizing that resistance shows up in these ways for us. And then if we follow our strategy and our inner authority, we actually get to experience this other frequency that contains a lot less resistance. It feels a lot better to us. So let's go on to generators and manifesting generators. They are the same type. They just have a slight difference, which is that a manifesting generator will have both the sacral center activated and colored in and a motor connected directly to the throat. So the manifesting generator is a generator that also has manifesting energy. But what makes generators and manifesting generators is that they have this red square, the sacral energy that gives them an open, enveloping aura, and it gives them consistent access to energy for activity, work, and sexuality, including reproduction. Now, most of the generators on the planet are conditioned to try to be manifestors, which means they're not following their strategy. They're operating out of their conditioning and they're looking outside of themselves for an example as to how to be that doesn't match what their energy is actually about. And so that leads to a lot of frustration. We live on a planet that is covered with a thick cloud of frustration because generators and manifesting generators together comprise about 75% of our population. Now, why is that? Why are they so populous? Because this is the center that builds the world. This is the center of life force energy. This is the center that creates businesses and enterprises and puts together concerts and activities. This is the center that creates babies. This is the life force of the planet. And that is why they are so populous on the planet. But because the conditioning to try to be a manifester is so strong, most of the world is living in frustration. And it's only once generators and manifesting generators of the world start to actually listen to their internal energy, which gives them a signal of response. Only once they start to respond to life by listening to their own energy can they feel satisfied. Notice that the generator isn't even actually here to be successful. You will be successful. The success of the generator is being satisfied in how you are experiencing and expressing your life force energy in the arenas of activity, work, sexuality, and reproduction. The tendency is for generators to think that frustration is something that has to be pushed through, but that's not it. The secret is to respond. Secret is that this sacral center is always open and enveloping, responding to life around you. And the response is the only thing that's going to lead you to satisfaction if you're a generator or a manifesting generator. And that's most of the world. So again, an individual reading will give you the specific insight into how this shows up for you in your design. But ultimately, it's only through responding to your sacral energy that you can move from frustration to satisfaction. Now, the final type is the projector. The projector comprises about 20% of the population, and projectors are the newest type of human on the planet. The projector allegedly came along in the same year that the planet Uranus triggered the genetic mutation in humans that gave us the 9 centers. At this point in time, with our 9-centered, the arrival of our 9 centers, there was a shift in the hierarchy of dominance on the planet. The manifestors had been the kings and queens of old, the monarchy, and they had ruled and largely enslaved the generators of the world, which is one of the reasons that generators are so conditioned to try to be like manifestors and also to try to push through their frustration because they don't recognize their own energy. They were enslaved and conditioned by manifestors for so long. So now with this arrival of the planet Uranus, the mutation that brought us 9 centers, the projector came to the planet with our focused absorbing aura. I am a projector, and if you are too, maybe you've recognized in your life that instead of having this open enveloping aura with this consistent energy, it's like life force, it's like juicy, that your aura has been a little different, that it kind of projects into the other, and that you have a real uncanny sense of understanding other people as they stand before you, really seeing them as the individuals that they are. And maybe there's been a little bit of having a challenge of really seeing and perceiving yourself and your own energy. And that is a part of the conundrum of what it means to be projector. Every type has some sort of internal challenge or conflict that it's dealing with. And for the projector, it's that we are here, we're designed to peer into the G center of especially the generators and manifesting generators of the planet so that we can recognize them and we can tell if they're actually responding to their own energy. Are they utilizing their energy wisely? And then with this insight, because we focus on them, we absorb some of their energy, we take it in and we know them, we can actually guide them back to their response. We're not trying to be the new manifestors and tell the generators and manifesting generators what to do. That's not what this is about. The guidance of the projector, the seeing that we have to see into others, that you have if you are a projector, is in order to guide the generator and manifesting generator, especially back to their own energy, back to their own internal response, so that they're no longer looking outside or living from their conditioning and covering our planet in this thick fog of frustration. We're here to help them become liberated and respond only to their own energy and have satisfaction. Now, it might sound like it's a raw deal for the projector. We peer into the other, we see them, we help them, and then what about us? We can't see ourselves very well. Well, the projector is here to have success living in our own energy as an energy being. And it actually means that we're free from our conditioning and we're not trying to be any of the other types. We have success managing our own energy on our own terms. And see, we don't have a sacral center either. We don't have this consistent energy for working and building the world that the generators and manifesting generators do. So we're here to have more freedom, to have more play, to relax, and to sort of step a little bit outside of that buzzing energy of the life force of the sacral energy on the planet, that strong conditioning field, and recognize ourselves as a little bit outside of it, and then get to be invited into it when it's appropriate for us, when it's correct for us, is what human design would say. And we do that by waiting for invitations. Okay. Now, why do we need to be invited? Our energy is intrusive, it pokes into the other. We also absorb some of them. And the generators and manifesting generators, especially whether it's conscious or unconscious, they can feel it. They're aware of it. And they're the dominant ones on the planet. They're the ones that have all the energy. They're also the ones that we're here to sort of free because they are 75% of the population. They have to recognize us. They have to decide that they actually want us to peer into them. They want you as a projector to peer into them and to help them see how to manage their energy better. When they invite you, they actually give you temporary access to their life force energy. The temporary nature of this invitation can vary depending on what type of projector you are, what your definition is, and also just the nature of the exchange between the two of you. It could be a very temporary interaction in, just a few moments. It could be a job that lasts over years. It could be a relationship that lasts a lifetime. So there are different lengths, types of invitations that happen for us. They're not all meant to be permanent. But we are our success as a projector, that we stop running from our conditioning. We stop trying to be like the generators. We stop trying to be like the manifestors. We're usually not trying to be like reflectors because there aren't that many of them around. But as we release that, we release this energy of bitterness that accumulates in us because we don't have manifesting energy. We don't have generating energy. We can see others very clearly. We can recognize patterns and we can see, if you're a projector, you can see people. You can see how they're managing their energy, whether they're utilizing it efficiently or they're wasting it. Wasting is a judgment because they can use their energy as any way that they want to. But if you're a projector, you've spent most of your life seeing how this manifesting and generating energy could best be used, knowing on some level that you don't have that. It's not connected to your throat. You don't have the consistent access here. That means that some opportunities have passed you by. That means sometimes you felt let down by your own energy. And that's led to a sense of bitterness. It's different than frustration. It's different than anger. It's even different than disappointment. It's on a different spectrum of frequency and is very repellent to the other types. So you might have noticed that others, like generators, can get together for a beer after work and they can kind of complain and vent their frustration. But when the projector comes in and they're like, yeah, and then they add, if you're a projector, maybe you've noticed this, you come in with your bitterness And it's a different frequency. You might even see generators disperse, or they're kind of looking at each other and going like, what was that about? Because this bitterness frequency, it's different and it's repellent. Nobody wants to be around the bitterness of the projector, but it's only because you're not honoring yourself and your own energy. You're operating out of conditioning. You're not trusting that you are actually designed to be recognized. You're designed to be invited. And so you're not trusting that if you relax into your own energy frequency and you do the deconditioning work of letting go of these amplified voices in your centers, that you will receive invitations. You don't trust that yet. It's only by really recognizing yourself in your body graph and understanding this information that you will feel confident in releasing the old patterns that have been driving you, waiting for your invitation so that you can drain the bitterness and experience the sweetness of the success that you're here to experience as a projector. And so that was a long kind of detour into the basics, the overview of type. But that's another thing that we see in our body graph that our map, the schematic, gives us. So the other thing that I mentioned earlier is that there are 64 gates that correspond to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, and that each of these gates has 6 lines or 6 potential expressions of energy. So I sometimes like to think of it as a shower head. And so then you have the energy of the gate streaming through the shower head. And then you have these 6 different settings. You know, the shower head, you can turn it and it's like a spray, and then it vibrates. And then, so there are these 6 different ways that that same energy of that gate can be expressed. And so this is another level, another layer of the uniqueness that is expressed in the body graph. You'll see that, so it's like if we could imagine first and foremost that the earth is at the center here and that these gates exist around the earth. So the neutrinos are streaming in from all directions from outer space. They're passing through the planets in our solar system, and they're coming in, they're activating a gate and a line, and then that gate is translated onto one of the centers of the body graph. Okay, so we see here, let's see if I can make it any bigger. If we look here, hexagram 1, it's also known as gate 1, is activated by the neutrino stream of the moon at the time of this person's birth, since it's in black. And it gets translated over here onto this center. Gate 1 lives on the G center in the body graph. Now, we don't see the line value in this particular image here, but that's what's happening, is that these gates, the neutrino stream programs the gates, and that information gets transferred onto one of the centers of the body graph. Each of those gates or hexagrams can be expressed in one of these 6 ways. The bottom 3 are the lower trigram. It's all about the self, the individual. The top 3 are the upper trigram, and it's all about other, about reaching across this divide here to connect with the other in one way or another. And so each of these 6 lines has a keynote, it has a theme. In the lower trigram, we have lines 1, 2, and 3. With line 1, always, every hexagram, the first line is going to express the energy of the investigator, which is also about the foundation, introspection. There's a chameleon-like nature here because the foundation is always having to learn more in order to retain its sense of security. So there's also a keynote of security or insecurity that goes along with this first line. And there's empathy, because the investigator really has to get down to the nuts and bolts and understand something very deeply before they can even feel secure in themselves. The second line is the hermit. The hermit doesn't need to know about the investigator or the foundation. The hermit is a natural. So the hermit sort of sits on top of the foundation. It sort of dances on top of the foundation, and it uses what it naturally recognizes works about the foundation. The second line is about absorption. So rather than the investigator that's studying and really wanting to know all the details of the system and exactly how things go together. This is the mathematician that wants to, check every step of the work. The hermit just wants to know E equals MC squared. Okay, how do I use that? They don't want to go back and do all the calculations that led up to knowing that E equals MC squared. If that makes any sense. So the hermit is the natural. The hermit gets projected onto because there's a sort of natural brilliance that emerges from uh, the hermit. And when others see it, they project onto that energy sometimes what they think they want or what they think that hermit is about. And it may or may not be true. The hermit is also the Democrat. They just want to have things be fair. The third line, which is the last of the lower trigram, is always going to be the martyr. And it's called that because the martyr learns through trial and error. The trial and error leads to a mutation of what the martyr knows about itself. And that allows it to be very adaptable, but not before it's gone through this experience of trial and error, which can lead to a feeling of shame. And it's that shame that leads the third line to feel as though they're a martyr. They're always bumping up against things and learning through this trial and error, which can be a very painful and also a very public experience. Other people are aware, they witness you bumping into things. And so there's shame associated with it. If you feel like you're being burned at the stake, learning these lessons that allow for mutation and adaptation, third lines always become very, very wise over time, because every time that they go into a trial and error process and they learn what doesn't work, they also learn plenty about what does work. So you'll see in your body graph that you have a combination of these different 6 line values associated with the gates that are active in your body graph, and that makes you unique. So this is seen, this moving from the lower to the upper trigram is seen as moving across this divide. So the third line is starting through this trial and error process to become aware that there is actually an other out there. This is all internal process. This is all about the self. But this trial and error process does start to reach across, and then the fourth line becomes the opportunist. Each of these is seen as building on the other. So the 2 contains the 1, the 3 contains the 1 and the 2, the 4 is now standing on a foundation that is made up of the 1, the 2, and the 3. And it's an opportunist in the sense that it wants to externalize the wisdom that has come from the first 3 lines. It wants to externalize the foundation and these the natural brilliance and the learnings through trial and error. And because it wants to externalize, it wants to reach out to others, it wants to make friends. It also wants to abdicate or create peace and, not cause trouble. Oh, it's okay, we can do it the way you want to or not, because it's through the friendliness of the fourth line that they get the opportunities to externalize and influence is the other keynote, another keynote that goes along with this fourth line, that they get to externalize their influence and actually have their wisdom be shared with another. The fifth line is called the heretic. The heretic is another projection field. It's one of the reasons it's called a heretic, is because just like this hermit gets projected on, people think they see into what that hermit is about, may or may not be true. People project onto this type of energy that the hermit or the heretic represents. And what they project onto this heretic is usually that either they have a truth that's here to save them, or they have a truth that is some sort of blasphemy. The truth that the heretic is here to share is a universal truth. It's meant to apply to everyone, and it's meant to bring solutions and solve problems and help people. So the projection field can be really intense for someone with a lot of fifth lines or with a fifth line personality or a body. And we'll look a little bit at that in an individual design, but a reading. But you'll see that most of us have some type of fifth line, somewhere in our design. And it's a place where we can sometimes feel that we're being seen as a threat. The heretic is also the general, universalizing things that are generalized for all of humanity. Now, the sixth line is seen as the culmination of the hexagram. So it contains the wisdom that is learned from all of the other lines. And it's a role model, administrator, optimist, and peacemaker because it's gleaned wisdom. Now, there's something to know about the sixth line because it has a very specific life path. The sixth line, everywhere that you see a sixth line or a six after the hexagram number on a body graph, you'll know that the energy represented by this hexagram and in this person's design has gone through a three-phase process of life. The first phase goes from about the age of 0 to 30. And in that phase of life, the six identifies as a three and it behaves as a three. So for about 30 years, give or take, of this person with a six somewhere in their body graph, most of us have one six or at least one six in our design somewhere. It's possible not to have any, but you might have a six somewhere in your body graph that you want to look at. Because for the first 30 years of your life, you would have noticed yourself behaving like a martyr, bumping into things, learning through trial and error, feeling some shame, but also learning through experience and adaptation. And when there's a third line, there's a willingness to engage in this process. Third lines, they sort of shrink from the shame, but there's a part of them that really wants to get in there into the trial and error process and get their hands dirty and try things out, experiment with things. After the age of 30, from the age of 30 to 50, early 50s, specifically the Chiron return, when that energy of Chiron circles back around to where it was when the person was born, this sixth line is like they come up onto the roof and they sit. They don't want to engage in this trial and error process anymore. Something about it doesn't feel good anymore, so they become aloof and they are metaphorically sitting on top. It's like the roof of this structure and they're watching the world go by. And instead of learning from being in there from trial and error, they're watching and they're, holding in their consciousness what they did learn from the trial and error. And they're watching other people's experiences. And, oh, I remember that. Oh, yeah, don't like that. That was all right, but I don't want that now. And so they're digesting and they're processing and they're kind of healing some of the wounds and the bumps and bruises that might have come from this third line process from the ages of 0 to about 30. And so they're sitting up here on this roof, being aloof from the process until the Chiron return in their early 50s. And then again, metaphorically, it's like they come down off of the roof, they re-engage with the community, with the village, with society, and now they get to be the role model. They learned through a bunch of trial and error. They took themselves back and they learned from their experiences and their wisdom, and now they get to share. They get to see the big picture. And so they have optimism because they know that there are processes that sometimes take time to unfold and just wait it out, you'll get there. And they're the peacemaker because they've resolved a lot of the conflict that came from the internal trial and error in them. And so again, this is another level of the uniqueness that is shown to us in our human design body graph. Each of those hexagrams, every single one, has these six lines. And by the way, they are either yin or yang, yang being a straight line, yin being a dashed line. And so again, this is representing the energy, the nature of the energy. In each of these hexagrams, they're going to have a combination of yin and yang and these different line values. So you might have a similar hexagram or gate in a similar planetary position, but have it activated in a totally different line value, and you'll express it differently than the person next to you. So we're finally getting to the second part of, strategy and authority, which is the big piece of information that human design wants to give you, because this is what you can trust to make decisions. And remember, I said that when we changed from a 7-centered being to a 9-centered being, we also changed from beings that are meant to make decisions from our minds to beings who are made to make decisions from this internal chemistry of our strategy and authority. So you see here this quote from Ra, the founder of the system: your inner authority always comes from your definition, by the way. It's always what's going to be defined in you. It's not what's open. But your inner authority is what you can trust to make decisions, and it's never the mind. Remember, I said the mind gets preoccupied with the voices in these open centers that are amplified 200%. But that's not what it is that we're here to listen to at this point in human history. We're here to listen to what is defined in us. And so there are these common inner authorities. Sacral inner authority is the generators and manifesting generators on the planet. Uh, unless their solar plexus is defined, then the emotional solar plexus always becomes, you'll see it's 47%. It's about half of us, a little less than half, that have emotional definition. If you have emotional definition, if this center is colored in, this is automatically your authority, your inner authority, meaning this is the signal that you're going to listen to know when to make a decision or not. If you don't have that defined, it's going to be something else. If you're a generator and you're not emotional, it'll be your sacrum that's going to give you a signal of response. If you don't have either one of these, your sacral or your solar plexus, you might be splenic if you have a spleen defined, but not one of those. So that means that your decisions are going to come from your intuition, your inner awareness of well-being, health, and safety in the moment. Right now, the spleen only speaks once. Some of these other authorities, you get a chance to consider things and take some time. The spleen, you have to trust yourself enough to make your decisions right now. And that can be really challenging, especially when you're only about 11% of the population. But there are other, even more rare inner authorities than the spleen. I happen to be a splenic projector, so this is my authority. But if you don't have a sacrum, a solar plexus, or a spleen defined, then you're one of these other minor authorities, including having no inner authority or being a mental projector or a reflector. So if you have ego authority, that means that you are also very rare and you are meant to listen to the voice of what it is that you want, what it is that you want to do. And that is the only place that you're ever meant to make a decision from. Or if you have no will center defined, no spleen, no sacral, no solar plexus, and you have a G center defined, that's the place that your inner authority speaks to you from. That is your heart, the feeling of direction and love in your life. And you literally allow your heart to speak through your voice, and you hear what you're saying about the next steps of direction and love in your life. And that's how you know when to make a decision. And if you don't have any of these centers defined, you only have your throat, your conceptualization center, or your head center, or maybe even just conceptualization in head, or you're a reflector and you have no definition at all, then you don't actually have an inner authority. The reflectors we spoke of, their authority is the moon cycle. Okay. So as long as they are trusting enough to wait out the lunar cycle, then that is a decision, that is something that they can trust. And then the mental projector has no definition below the throat. And the mental projector needs to use other people as a sounding board. They need to, almost similar to the G center authority, but it's different because it is coming from the inner thought processes and awarenesses of the mental projector, that they will speak to somebody else as a sounding board and sort of hear themselves speak and get some reflections about things based on what they do know about themselves. You know, I'm not going to lie, these can be a little bit more challenging, especially because, as I said, the voices of the open centers are amplified. So this is the potential for a lot of loudness, detracting the person from their own inner self. But if you know your strategy, if you know your type and your strategy as a projector, as a reflector, and you understand what that says to you about your energy, and you are dedicated to honoring the dignity of your own energy, you will be able to follow the lunar cycle and trust it as it's taking you along. or you'll be able to recognize, am I being recognized as a mental projector and invited into something that truly serves my energy? So that was just a brief little explanation of what inner authority is about. This is one of the big pieces that human design is going to give you through your body graph. So we talked about conditioning and the voices that come through the open centers. Human design calls this the not self. This is what tends to have been driving us for most of our lives until we encounter design or something that's allowed us to make another choice. Human design tends to see itself as the main way that we can free ourselves from the specifics of this conditioning and actually align with the clarity of our strategy and authority to make real trustable decisions in our lives. But I know that other people find other systems and other processes that give them the ability to release conditioning. But I wonder if you've seen your conditioning as clearly as the human design system can present it to you. And so, depending on what you have defined or open in your body graph, you may be conditioned to be driven by one of these voices. If your head center is open, mine is open, you might find that you think about things that don't matter. One of the ways this used to show up for me is that I would be in an environment somewhere and somebody would ask a random question. Well, an example I sometimes use is like, I wonder what Elton John has for breakfast. Doesn't matter. But my open head would grab onto that question and I would feel pressure because remember, this is a pressure center. I would feel pressure. I have to figure this out, and in the days before Google, that could be more challenging. But like I might find myself going online and Googling it and trying to find out what Elton John has for breakfast just so that I can answer this question that the amplified voice of my head center was telling me was so important, not important at all. So maybe you can notice a pattern like that in your life. Maybe you've gotten better with it over time if you've recognized conditioning in some other way. But this is what happens to us when we have an open head. If you have an open conceptualization center, the tendency can be the pressure is still coming down from the head center onto the conceptualization center. So there's a pressure to feel like you're certain. People who have definition in their ajna or head center can feel very certain about what they think, even if it's not always right, even if it changes over time. If they're thinking something, they feel very certain about it. And that certainty is being amplified 200% in your consciousness if you are someone with an open ajna center. So you might feel pressure to pretend that you are more certain about things that you think you know than you actually are. You can let that go. Just like I can let go of thinking about what Elton John had for breakfast, you can let this go. If you have an open throat and you don't have energy that is able to get to the throat center so that you can manifest and express yourself and communicate and get things done, you might feel that you have to attract attention. You're amplifying the energy of everyone around you who's communicating or not communicating. And again, there can feel like there's pressure here. The whole system is pressurized. So the pressure when it arrives at the throat can make you feel like you have to do something to attract attention. You might be the class clown. You might wear loud clothing. Whatever it is that you have found as a strategy in your life to get people to pay attention to you, to feel like you can be heard and seen, or even to feel like you can get things done. That's going to manifest here as trying to attract attention. If you have an open G center, mine is wide open with zero activations. And this ran me for a long time in my life, fixated on finding love and direction. Who am I? What am I going to be? What am I doing with my life? Who loves me? Who am I supposed to be with? What is love? All of these questions, they drove me so many of my decisions. Maybe you can relate to this. If you have an open G center, the feeling of insecurity around who you are, who you love, and where you're going can be really intense. You can let that go. You're not here to figure that out. You're here to actually witness and appreciate all the different ways that other people with their defined G centers do that. And you receive from life love, identity, and direction. And more of that would be clarified for you in a reading. So if you have an open heart center, I have an open heart center. Most of the world has an open heart center. About 60% of the world has an open heart center, about 40% has it defined. Those of us that have an undefined heart center can sometimes feel that we have something to prove. Because remember, this center is about willpower. It's about our individual value, feeling that we have value, and it's about making and following through with promises and commitments. So we can sometimes feel that we have to commit to something to prove that, that we care about it. We can feel like we have to make a promise in order to prove to someone that we care about them. And then when we don't have the consistent energy to follow up with that, to follow through with it totally, we can feel that we let ourselves down. We can feel like a failure. We can feel like we don't have value and we didn't prove ourselves. Again, we can just let that go. We can allow those on the planet that have this definition here to be the ones to make and keep promises. We can allow them to be the ones that, the ego and the will, it's going to go out there and it's going to do impressive stuff. And that's all right, because that doesn't add or take away value from who you are as a person. Your value is unconditional. Your value is being human and having this unique perspective that is the only one of a kind. Your perspective is one of a kind, and you're the only one that can express that. And if you have an open heart center, that is part of that unique outer authority, which is what human design calls it, your unique perspective that you have to share. And the value of that is unconditional. Okay. If you have an open solar plexus, again, it's about a little over half of us are undefined solar plexus, and then a little less than half are defined in the solar plexus, which means that a lot of us are avoiding confrontation and truth. Why is that? Because we amplify the energy of this center when we're around someone who has a defined solar plexus. We are amplifying their emotional energy. We feel it in our bodies. I also have undefined solar plexus. So I've lived a life where I get around the energy field of a defined solar plexus person, and maybe they're low in their emotional chemistry at that point in time, which is totally appropriate for them because they have to ride the wave of that chemistry. But it feels really bad to me because I'm amplifying it 200%. And so I don't want to have that tough conversation I need to have with them. Why? Because as soon as I stimulate something in them emotionally, I'm going to feel it 200%. If they're feeling uncomfortable emotionally or they're upset, I'm going to feel that 200%. So I avoid it. I'm going to avoid speaking up for myself or telling this person what I really think. Why? Because if they don't feel good about what I have to say, I'm going to feel the amplification of their uncomfortable emotional energy in my body. And so I've learned to avoid that. That was a strategy, but this is a not self strategy. A lot of us have this. And so we need to learn how to let go. Human design says be a screen, not a sponge. So be aware of the emotional energy and, oh, that's not me, that's someone else. Don't absorb it, don't identify with it. Sometimes we need to remove ourselves from that person's aura for a little while so that we can reground in our own energy. If we don't have definition in our sacral center, this is consistent energy for work, activity, and sexuality. The tendency is to not know when enough is enough. We don't know when we've had enough sex. We don't know when we've done enough work. We don't know when we've done enough activity. Why is that? Well, think about the definition of the center creating a natural boundary. And then there is a natural internal pressure in the center when it's defined that gives the being a measure of that's enough, or I'm done, or I don't want to do that anymore. That's what response is about. And so if we don't have the definition that creates that natural internal boundary for this energy, we're just amplifying, 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 amplifying the energy. But ultimately, there are consequences to trying to run on amplified energy. Amplification can lead to distortion. If you think of a speaker system, and if you have the microphone and you get it too close to those speakers, you're going to get a feedback frequency. Okay, so that's a system out of alignment. When we're amplifying energy from somebody else or from the transits, we are not necessarily in alignment with our own energy. And if we make decisions or we keep running on that energy, it can lead to amplification, which gets very uncomfortable. And it also leads to energy consequences in our body like burnout. Okay. So if you are an open sacral being and you've experienced burnout in your life, most of us do at one point or another, maybe even a couple of times, it's because you've been conditioned by the energy of the sacral center. 75% of the planet have this defined. So the conditioning field is very strong to have consistent energy for activity and sexuality and work. But if your sacrum is undefined, you're not designed for that. Okay. The root center, if your root is open and undefined, you are under pressure and you are amplifying that pressure. And there's a tendency for you to feel like you have to hurry up to get free of the pressure. You'll never be free of the pressure. You have to learn to recognize the pressure and to let it go. And then in your spleen, if you have an undefined spleen, your tendency will to be to hold on to what isn't good for you. Why? Because the spleen is the center of our well-being, of our health, of our intuition, and our immunity. So when the spleen is defined, we can tend to have a natural sense of well-being and feeling good. We can have a natural sense of being healthy and of, if we're following our spleen, of being in the right place at the right time to experience our well-being versus having accidents and things like that. An undefined spleen can make you feel insecure about your well being. And so you'll tend to hold on to people and places and jobs and situations that once brought you a sense of well being, even if they don't anymore. And so these are other bits of information that are very valuable that are going to come to you through understanding and seeing your specific body graph. Now, the information isn't enough. The information is just information until you decide to experiment with it. So, living your human design is often referred to as living your experiment. What does that mean? It means that instead of just knowing that you have a strategy and authority, that you focus in your day on listening to that internal signal and following it to the best of your ability. It means that you not only know that you have conditioning in your open centers and that they have different voices that are amplified and tending to drive you, that you actually pause and you take time in your life to ask yourself before you make a decision, am I making this decision based on the energy of my open center? Am I making this decision based on conditioning or on what's fixed and reliable in me, which is my strategy and authority? And so as you start to develop that awareness and you start to develop the willingness to actually let it be practical for you in your day-to-day life, this is experimentation. As you notice the patterns in your daily life of somebody coming into your aura and maybe bringing you temporary definition and feeling that, and then feeling what it's like for that energy to receive, and then recognizing that maybe in the past you had made a choice to try to stay in relationship with that person, or even to emulate something about their behavior or their way of being. Now you know that that was conditioning that was driving you. It was giving you louder information, amplified information that you conditioned yourself to respond to. You don't have to do that anymore. As you start doing that in your life, you are experimenting with the human design knowledge, and it comes off of the page. It comes off of the two-dimensional image of the body graph, and it becomes real in your life. And that's the only way that this information actually has any value for you. You have to experiment with it. You have to live with it and start to recognize it in your life. And as you do that and you start making different decisions and choices, start honoring your energy, you decondition. And it's the deconditioning process that drains the open centers of the not self frequencies, so the frustration or the bitterness or the anger or the disappointment that dissipates from your system. You decondition. Human design says, because we're talking about the DNA in our cells. Our cells reproduce themselves in cycles of plus or minus 7 years, some a little bit more, some a little bit, less. But in about 7 years, as you experiment with this information and you literally allow it to change the way that you are physically interacting with your life, it starts to change the information as it's programmed in your DNA. And you actually get a brand new body of cells that are ready to be more aligned with your true self and your strategy and authority than with the old conditioned way of being. That you only arrive there by being willing to experiment. Now, I'll say for myself that I'm recording this in October of 2023, and it was in December of 2016 that I decided to take my experiment very seriously. I dove into my experiment, and I've been doing my best to follow my strategy and authority and release my conditioning to decondition for just about 7 years. So I can feel the difference, and I'm really looking forward to what's beyond the 7 year mark as my being continues to become lighter and I am less and less inclined to be run by conditioning. It means my mind works more clearly. It means that I can feel my own emotions, my own feelings in my body as what's mine and what's not mine, much more than before. I feel more centered in my own life and my own experience instead of all of these voices of conditioning just entering into me and speaking to me so loudly that I can't actually hear the voice of my spleen, which is my intuition, and that's my inner authority. Okay. So we're getting towards the end of this intro to human design. I know it's been kind of long, but it's a lot of information in this system. And for you to recognize what it is that you're looking at in the body graph, you do kind of need an introduction. So thanks for bearing with me and staying this long. I wanted to show you some other things that human design has to share with us. And so one of the things that human design can do is it can take two individual body graphs. You see both of these here have a black and a red. So these are two separate individuals, and it can put them together in what's called a composite chart. And so then you can see, how do these two different energy systems come together to create this unique third entity? It's actually a third consciousness that is created. And so since we can see this, we understand how the energies interact with one another. Human design calls this mechanics. There are mechanics in the way that our individual chemistry works because of the activations in our human design. There are mechanics that are at play because of the transits of the planets and how they then come and interact with our individuality. But there are also mechanics. You can think of these as laws of physics that are at play when two individuals come together and create this unique third consciousness. And the mechanics are something that, according to the system, they cannot be changed. They can only be understood and accepted and related to with awareness. And that awareness can engender compassion. But human design can show us the various configurations, the strengths, the challenges of any partnership between two people. It's a really beautiful thing. Actually, I had brought up on my other browser, I brought up a composite chart that had been really famous last year. I actually did get sucked into this a little bit, and I had to look at it because I wanted to see what kind of a composite chart would lead to such a challenging relationship between two people who thought that they were in love. And so here we have Johnny Depp on the one side and Amber Heard on the other side. Amber is a 1-3 generator. Johnny is a 2-4 manifester. So we didn't talk about profile here, but it's another element of the uniqueness of your design. It's like a costume that you're wearing. And they have a split definition, 7-2 work to do. So this is some of the information that the composite chart will give you, is how many centers are defined versus open. You'll see they have 7 defined versus 2 undefined. That creates a connection where there's some work to do between the people. But what really stood out to me was that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, their entire connection is based on what's called compromise or dominance. Dominance is when one person has an entire channel and the other person has nothing there. So you'll see Amber has this channel, it's all blue because that's her. Johnny has this channel, it's all green because it's all him. and the other person doesn't have any definition in that channel. So the person that does have definition there dominates in that energy stream. And it's actually something we can appreciate in the other because there's no like competition or conflict. So they have these dominance channels, but the thing that really makes up their connection is what's called compromise. And compromise can be very challenging, especially over time, because in the beginning, compromise can feel like what's called electromagnetic. We don't have any examples of that here, but it would be like if Amber had this gate up here, this gate 35, and it made it so that she has one end and he has the other end of a channel. That's electromagnetic. That feels nice and juicy between two people. Compromise, on the other hand, is when we have, you see that Amber has an entire blue channel here, and Johnny Depp only has this little green gate right there. Well, it means that Johnny Depp is actually compromised in this channel. And I'm glad I picked this one because this is the channel of struggle, which is where a person is designed or not to struggle for individual purpose. It is comprised of the gate of the fighter on the root center, which Johnny Depp has the gate of the fighter, but he doesn't have the other end of the channel, which is the gate of the game player. And when the person has the entire channel, this energy is grounded. What this means is that Amber is naturally designed to struggle and fight for what it is that she believes in that brings her a sense of individual purpose. And she will have a grounded balance in her own way. It doesn't mean she always fights fair or always does it the right way, between playing games, being willing to work a system or participate in a certain process like the legal system, and having the energy to fight and really struggle like a dog on a bone for that thing. Well, for her, this is a natural process. She's designed to do this. For Johnny Depp, he only has the gate of the fighter. And what this means is that when these two come together, at first, it's going to feel like they both have something to contribute here. But over time, it's going to be revealed that Amber has this process in her own self, and Johnny Depp doesn't actually have anything to contribute to it for her. He's going to feel destabilized in this energy of fighting, literally fighting. So this brought up a lot of fights between the two of them. And because Johnny Depp was destabilized, there would tend to be escalation in these fights. I'm not saying it always came from him, but I don't want to really go too far into this right now. I just wanted to show you this example, because this is some of the information that we can get from a composite human design chart. We get to see two individuals and how their energies come together to create a unique third entity. Human design also has information about group dynamics, including the penta, which is more of a small group. A penta, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. A penta is like a family group of 3 to 5. So the penta, they can map pentas. Human design can map a penta and show you how when you get into a group of 3 to 5 people, I'm sorry, I lost that. I can't show that to you right now. How you get into a group of 3 to 5 people, there is again another transpersonal auric consciousness that is created when all of these energy centers, energy systems come and interact with one another. They also have a way to map a WA, which is an organization of 16 people or more. And so again, these trans-auric forms, either in a partnership, in a penta, or a WA, are a separate consciousness that gets formed. And there are mechanics that govern how each person is basically confined to a certain role within a partnership, a family, or an organization. It's really fascinating. Human design also talks about the global consciousness program and global cycles. So it's a vast, prolific system is part of what I just want to get across to you very briefly. And they have this calendar of these cycles of consciousness that have been unfolding. They start here in 16101 BC, and this particular graph goes up to 3674 AD. And as you can see, we're right here in this cross of planning is what they call it, from 1615 to 2026. And then we're moving into a new global cycle as a part of the global consciousness program. in the year 2027, which is one of the reasons that human design came to the planet, because there will be some striking differences between the cycle we've been in since 1615, which was very tribal oriented, to the cycle we're moving into in 2027, the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is all about the individual. Well, what does the individual really need? The individual needs to know who they are, to recognize themselves, and to be able to make decisions that support their own unique energy signature and their own self expression in life. That's not what we've been conditioned to. We've been conditioned to find a way to fit into the tribe, the greater tribe. But now we're being asked by consciousness on the planet to learn more about what it means to truly honor our individual uniqueness and dignity. And so that's one of the reasons the system exists on the planet. So it's been tracking these global cycles of the Global Consciousness Program. And it says we've been in the cross of planning from the year 1615 up until the year 2027 is coming. And so human design, the founder has said that we have been able to feel this shifting of the sands, this beginning of the energies shifting. And what we're looking at here is these are the gates of the G center and the human design body graph. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned that the G center is the center for love, identity, and direction for the individual, but also for the entire collective of humanity. And so here we see these are the gates. They're not in the exact position that they're on in the G center when we look at it on the body graph, but each of these gates is represented here, and it has a purpose for the collective of humanity. Gate 1 is where we, whatever uh, whatever energy in the global cycle is housed within gate 1 is where we're going to see the example of what it is that we're here to do as a part of the collective. Gate 46 will show us the temple in which we're meant to work. Like, where do we really put our energy and our focus to revere the process of life on the planet? In gate 7, we're always going to find the energy that represents the leader. In gate 15, we'll always find the energy that represents the pattern that we're all finding a place in. Gate 2 will always show us the energy of the overall plan that the pattern is serving. Gate 25 will show us the way. So the temple and the way go together. You can see these axes here, the pattern and the nature, which we haven't touched on yet. Gate 13 will tell us the witness of humanity. So really, this is the perspective through which we understand the events of history. The witness and the leader are on this axis here. And then gate 10 is always going to tell us about the energy of the nature that we're here to embody. What is it that we're here to embody? And so without knowing much about human design, you wouldn't know that we have here the cross of planning is actually this 916 and this 3740, which are all about developing the focus to apply skills in the temple of work in order to serve the family. So this is the tribal conditioning that we've been under for the last 400 years. So this means you go and you get a job and you work at the temple in order to provide for the family. And the way that you work is that you focus on developing skills that then fit into the overall pattern. Okay. So this is going to be changing. I think maybe even just the brief description I gave you, you can see how that's the way that society has been, designed to work. You go get a job, and then the other part is that we have these systems that are meant to support you individualize your skills that you apply to the pattern, and other people individualize their skills. So you go to work and you do this job. Meanwhile, the bankers make sure the money is safe, and the grocers make sure that the groceries are at the store and available for you to buy and things like that. Well, some of these systems are meant to be breaking down right now. And it's one of the reasons that, human design wants us to look at what's happening on the world stage through the lens of this system and see it's appropriate for some of our governments and our institutions to be crumbling right now, because the support, the energetic support that has kept them in place, at least for the last 400 years, it's shifting. And what's it shifting into? It's shifting into this cross of the sleeping phoenix, where we'll see that these gates around the outside, they're the same, but the energies that inhabit the gates have shifted. And so instead of going to work to worship in order to provide for the family, now what we're doing is we're worshiping in the temple of our sexuality in order to support our individual spirit. So this is a very individual pathway. We're no longer going out in our lives in order to be a part of the tribe. This is really about the individual. And how is the individual going to be working in the temple and supporting the way? Well, the nature is personal power now. Remember, it was focus on developing skills. Well, now it's personal power expressed in the now. That's what these numbers, the 34 and the 20, represent. 34 is personal power. It's a gate that comes off the sacral center. And 20 is about in the now, it's about awareness in the now. These actually make a channel together. This is the quintessential manifesting generator channel, the channel of charisma. And so it's also about busyness, but the busyness is no longer supporting the tribe. The busyness is here to support the individual in creating the right bonds, the right intimate and sexual bonds in life that really support the needs of the individual spirit. That's the way moving forward. We're moving into a time that human design calls enlightened selfishness. And so each individual human is going to need to know how to honor their own unique individuality, how to be themselves in the world. And for a lot of people, that means that their job might not be available anymore once some of these institutions and structures of support crumble. And then they're going to be left floundering because they never actually turned their attention to understanding their own unique design and how they're meant to interact with the forces, the laws of attraction and the laws of abundance and the laws of energy dynamics on our planet as themselves in order to access their abundance and the energy that they need to live a good life and to even just feel good as who they are. Once all of those tribal support systems where people show up and they focus on a skill and they apply it for the greater good of the tribe, once that starts to dissolve and it's not available anymore, there are people that are going to feel very bewildered because they won't have taken the time to understand themselves individually. But that's not you, because you're here watching this video and now you know why human design is so insistent that it's important for you to understand your body graph and follow your inner strategy and authority. So here, this is just another way of representing those energies. So we saw that the excuse me, just for a second. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. These gates that are around the outside, these are also known in the Global Consciousness Program as locks. So we have the locks here. These are the gates of the G center that were around that mandala we were just looking at. And then we have the keys. We have the keys that have been in those locks, the energies determining the nature of those locks, how it's being expressed from 1615 to 2026. And then we have the keys from 2027 up to 2438. So we see that we had family and community. Aloneness was where you go to work and you worship in this temple of aloneness, of applying focus of skills that you've honed in order to support and contribute to the family and community. But what's changing about that is that we're no longer all about family community. It's not about the tribe anymore. This is tribal energy. This is individual energy over here. The 59 is still tribal, but we're going to be looking for the correct intimate and sexual bonds that support our individual sense of spirit and abundance by expressing our power in the now. It's very, very different than it was before. Up until 2026, we've been interpreting history through the gate of inner truth. The leader has been about the one that has the details. The leader has had the details. The witness of history has been inner truth. The plan has been, okay, the example has been about continuity, so showing up and following through with the proper steps of a process. And the plan has been actually about completion. So we've been completing a cycle. It's been built into the process of planning. But now we're going to be led by the person who sees the new beginning. We're going to be witnessing history through those who have the ambition and the drive to really, move themselves forward in life. And the example is going to be intuition, and the plan is all about initiating new awakening. That's what this Gate 51 is about. And so we see here, it was inner truth, details, continuity, and endings that were all about the direction that we were going in. Now it's about drive, ambitions, new beginnings, intuition, and so shock, initiation through shock. Very different energies. And this is all meant to be happening. The center point of the shift is in 2027, actually in February of 2027. And Ra says that the wheel is going to turn. We're going to enter into an age of over 400 years in which the main theme is going to be individual survival. It's why this knowledge came into the world. It's for those who are going to be born, or those children who are going to be correctly raised now, so that they're going to be able to live in a world, in that world, in the new world, and be able to deal with that world. So that's why human design is here. That's why it might be relevant for you to learn more about your body graph and learn how to live your strategy and authority. There is a whole prophecy of 2027, and another thing that Ra says is coming in 2027 is that there will be a new type of human called the rave. Now, human design isn't the only system that I study. And in terms of what's happening evolutionarily for humanity at this point in time, I've actually received much more inspiring, uplifting information about the changes that are coming to humanity in our genetics and what we consider to be human nature and how we are meant to show up as consciousness on this planet. I actually believe that Ra, the founder of the system, died in the year 2011, at least in part because he was very attached to what he saw about what the system meant for the future. And I believe that it was only in the year 2012 that humanity passed a marker of the precession of the equinoxes. I'm going off on a little tangent here, but it is part of what the 2027 is about with human design. And it wasn't until 2012 that we actually passed the marker and that the energy on the planet started to change to support higher consciousness within humans. But Ra, the founder of the system, he died in 2011. And so I don't think that he was really allowing himself to see that there were new potentials. I like the new potentials better. Ra says that the rave, like I said, the solar plexus center will become a center of mindfulness. So it's becoming an awareness center instead of a motor. And that people after this year, they will have a lot of potential for emotional awareness. But instead of being human beings, as we know ourselves now, Ross says they'll be called raves. They will be externally emotionless. They will be socially detached from other people. They will be vegetarians. They will have hypersensitive skin, problems with speech, poor eyesight, a lack of desire for knowledge. There will be differences in their body graph, including they'll be all receptive variable. We didn't go into variable here. It's actually one of the levels of substructure, a deeper level of information about your cognition. But so instead of having active strategic cognition, I happen to be an example of all active strategic cognition. These new beings will be all receptive. They will also only really operate in transauric forms, so pentas and was. And Ra kind of paints this picture of a future where humanity and these raves are living side by side on this planet, but not really having a lot to do with one another. And as I said earlier, I prefer other visions of our collective conscious future of humanity. But I just wanted to let you know that that's another thing that is part of the human design system, is cosmology in terms, as well as predictions for our future. I prefer to see us as ascending. This just happens to be an infographic that I picked. I don't subscribe to any of the, I don't, yeah, this isn't something that I'm associated with, but that we are actually moving. We crossed the galactic center in 2012. We passed a marker, and humanity has moved, the planet, the entire planet has moved into a new phase of creation on the planet. And consciousness is shifting very dramatically and quickly at this point in time, especially for those who are aware and tuned into it. But so I prefer to think of our future as different. And I brought this up because I really like this idea. It's easy to think of ourselves as sort of alone, humanity on this planet as being alone and not having a lot of support. And as the world changes around us, whether you subscribe to what human design says about the changes that are happening, it's easy to see that we're living in a very dynamic period of change on our planet, and that part of that change presents itself as chaos. And so sometimes it can feel as though there's not a lot of support for humanity. But I just wanted to share, this isn't human design information at all. This is actually from another system that I am very aligned with about what's happening on the planet from here forward, especially since 2012. They say that sometime in our ancient history, that there was a consciousness that came to this planet and installed these energy points on our planet. And that in the year 2012, one of the things that happened as we moved past this marker is that they began to activate one pair at a time. And so by the time winter of 2019 came around, all of these pairs had been activated. In fact, the last pair was activated in December of 2019. What happened in January, February, March of 2020, right after this, the coronavirus? Okay, so what happened was that these energy points got activated and they started cleaning the energy grids of the planet. Now, when is the last time that you cleaned something very dirty? You thought it was dirty when you started cleaning it, and then you put water and soap on it, and it's like dirt came out from all these nooks and crannies and crevices, and it's like, oh my God, it's dirtier than I thought. That's what's happening on our planet right now. When we look around and we watch the news and we see conflicts and we see corruption and we see all of these things, that's like, oh, well, I knew it was bad, but now it seems worse. I like to think that it's because these points of energy, they're time capsules of consciousness that were embedded in our planet a long, long time ago. They started to activate in 2012, a pair at a time. By December 2019, they were all online, and they started cleaning our planet so intensely that we actually couldn't go outside. We had to stay in our homes and allow this process to unfold for a couple of years. Okay. And so we're coming out of that now in the end of 2023. But so I wanted to just, this isn't human design, as I said, it's just another perspective. And I hope that it can maybe inspire you with a little of a sense of hope, but also the uncanniness of the overlap of the timing of 2012 and then 2019, and then the pandemic shut down the world in an unprecedented way in 2020. We are in a new phase of humanity on this planet. And human design might not have the whole picture. I actually think that it's as amazing as it is, that there are limitations and that there are other places we can look for better information about certain things. But the system has a lot to offer you in terms of learning how to live as yourself, learning how to awaken the potential of the human that you are, your genetic potential, your spiritual potential, all of that. Human design wants to help you align with the energetic frequency that you brought into this life so that you can release and reduce resistance. You can have a smoother ride. And in my opinion, as we release that resistance, our frequency rises. And as that happens, we gain access to all kinds of new potentials. In fact, the founder of the system of human design, Ra Uru, he, I'm sorry, what was I going to say there? The founder of the system of human design, he, well, he accounted for mutation in the system, and he knew that there would be mutation that happened as the system came to the planet and people utilized the information. And so, we're in the midst of that. We are seeing how our humanity is developing into something beyond what it is that we've known it to be before. I just happen to think that it's actually a more beautiful, um, it's more beautiful than what Ra saw for us. Um, and I do appreciate the system and I appreciate everything that he's brought to the world. So again, this was your introduction to human design, as shared by me, Christy Rose Muir. And I hope that that was enlightening to you. And I hope that that made you curious about what it is that you can unlock in yourself by being aware of your unique, one of a kind, never ever to be duplicated or repeated energetic configuration and human design. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you later.